from the great state of Texas, Senator Ted Cruz. Bless the great state of Iowa. I'll tell you, I am thrilled to be here, Rod. Thank you for the very kind introduction. You know, and let me say to each of the men and women here, thank you for setting Rod Blum to watch. The media said the first district was a Democratic district.
Yep.
And yet the people here in this room said, no, it belongs to the people of Iowa. You know, Rod talked about Harry Reid retiring. You know, back in January, I was walking down the halls in the Capitol, and I bumped into a janitor. He was carrying a screwdriver and coming to change the sign on Harry Reid's door.
Amen.
Let me tell you something. The men and women in this room played a big, big part in Harry Reid retiring.
Yes.
Because the men and women in this room helped send Joni Ernst to the United States Senate.
Yeah.
The first thing she did is she told Harry Reid she knew something about cutting pork. And he promptly said, I'm out of here. I want to first follow Barbara Grassley's advice and introduce my wife and the love of my life, Heidi Cruz.
Amen.
Beautiful, she's brilliant, she's an amazing businesswoman. She has very, very poor eyesight. But I'll say this, she is an unbelievable mom to our two little girls, and she is my very best friend in the entire world. I love her. As I mentioned, we've got two daughters. Caroline is 6, Catherine's 3. Remember about 3 years ago, we were vacationing with our girls. Caroline was about 3 at the time. Catherine was a baby. And we were vacationing with another couple that has 2 little girls too. And we're getting ready to go out to dinner, and Caroline wanted to go in the car with the girls, and there was no room. And she promptly began throwing a temper tantrum. She fell on the floor, began kicking and screaming and yelling. I know none of y'all have ever had a child. And I'll tell you, Heidi is tough. She pulled Miss Caroline up and she talked to her and she shaped her up. And we went to dinner. We came back. And that night, Caroline was saying her prayers before she went to bed. She was on her knees in the hotel room. She was looking up and she said, Dear Jesus, tonight, we had a situation. And I'm not sorry. But it's not going to happen again. And you know, that's why all of us are here. We're here today because we love our kids.
Yes.
We're here today because we love our grandkids. And we're here today because we recognize the path that this country is on isn't working.
Yep.
And we got to change. 9 days ago, I announced my candidacy for President of the United States. In a 30-minute announcement speech, I said the words President Obama once. Look, we all know what's going wrong. People are ready to move on. People are ready to turn the page. People are ready to turn things around. So what I want to do with you today is I want to talk to you about how we reignite the promise of America. How we get back to the revolutionary idea our country was founded on, that our rights, they don't come from government, they come from God Almighty. And as the Constitution serves, as Jefferson put it, as chains to bind the mischief of government.
Yes.
How we get back to the incredible opportunity that has always characterized America. This has been a land where every one of us, our families, we are the children of those who risked everything. There has been no land in the history of the world that has enabled so many millions of people to come with nothing and achieve anything. How do we reignite that promise? Number one, we bring back jobs and growth and opportunity. We get back to an environment where small businesses are prospering and creating opportunities. Imagine, instead of having young people coming out of school up to their eyeballs in school loans, wondering if they're going to find a job. What kind of job? Are they going to be serving coffee? Are they going to get the skills to begin their careers? Imagine instead young people come out of school at a time of booming growth, where you have 2, 3, 4, 5 jobs. It used to be.
Yep.
You put your finger right on it. Look, we understand cause and effect. Every time the federal government pursues the policies of today, out of control spending and taxes and regulations, what inevitably happens is misery and stagnation and malaise.
That's right.
It doesn't work.
Nope.
And the flip side, every time we pursue tax reform and regulatory reform, the result is incredible economic growth.
Yes.
That was true in the 1920s, in the 60s, and in the 80s. Simplifying, reducing the burdens on every one of us from the tax code. The best tax reform, we should adopt a simple flat tax.
Yes.
That's fair, that lets every American fill out his or her taxes on a postcard.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we should abolish the IRS.
Yeah.
There are 90,000 employees at the IRS. We need to put a padlock on that building and take every one of them and put them on our southern border.
Yes. Yeah.
Now I say that for our friends in the media somewhat tongue-in-cheek. But think about it for a second. Imagine you have traveled thousands of miles in the blazing sun. You swim across the Rio Grande. The first thing you see is 90,000 IRS.
Yeah.
You turn around and go home.
Yeah.
And then there is regulatory regulatory reform, stopping the regulators, the federal government, whether it's the EPA or OSHA or the alphabet soup, that is slamming farmers and ranchers and small businesses.
Right.
You know, I was out in West Texas once and I said, you know, the difference between regulators and locusts is you can't use pesticide on the regulator. And this old farmer looked at me and said, "Want to bet?" And the simplest and most important regulatory reforms. We need to repeal every word of Obama.
Yeah!
Politicians in Washington who've given up on doing that. The only way that gets done is if it comes from the people.
Yep.
The only way we actually repeal this thing is if this next election is a referendum.
Right.
Which is exactly what I intend to make it. Bringing back freedom to the American people.
Yes!
Is defend our constitutional rights.
Yes.
All of them. We need to defend the First Amendment, free speech, religious liberty.
Amen. Right.
Religious liberty's never been more under assault in this country than it is right now.
That's right.
Amen.
We need to stand up and say the First Amendment is not a wedge issue.
Yes.
It is an issue that unites us and brings us together. It is who we are as a people.
Right.
We need to defend the Second Amendment.
Yes.
You know, Vice President Joe Biden.
Yep.
You know the nice thing? You don't need a punchline. I promise you it works. The next time you're at a party, just walk up to somebody, say Vice President Joe Biden. And just close your mouth. They will laugh 100% of the time. But you know, Biden said if anybody attacks your house,
Yep.
just go outside with a double-barreled shotgun.
Yep.
Fire both barrels in the air.
Hypocrite.
Now that is very, very good advice.
Yes. Yes, it is.
If it so happens you're being attacked by a flock of geese. We need to defend the Fourth and Fifth Amendments, our right to privacy.
Yeah.
How many of y'all have your cell phones here today? Let me ask you, please leave your cell phones on.
Okay.
I want to make sure President Obama hears every word we say. We need to defend the 10th Amendment. Or as President Obama calls it, the what? The fundamental protection that says the powers not given to the federal government are reserved to the states.
Yes.
Some roles that the federal government is assigned that it needs to perform and perform well. It needs to defend this country. We need to stand with the men and women of the military, and we need to secure the border. But there are other roles that the federal government has no business sticking its nose in.
Amen.
Areas like education.
Amen.
Every word of Common Core.
Yes!
laughable bureaucrats in Washington.
Yes.
Right.
It needs to be at the state level, or even better, at the local level.
Yes!
And third, we need to restore America's leadership.
Yes.
The Obama-Clinton foreign policy of leading from behind, it doesn't work. Instead of a president who boycotts Prime Minister Netanyahu,
Yeah.
imagine America standing unapologetically
Yes.
alongside him.
Yes!
Imagine a commander-in-chief who stands up and says, "We will destroy radical Islamic terror."
Yes. Yes.
And he will call it by its name.
Yes. Yes.
And under no circumstances will Iran be allowed to acquire nuclear weapons.
Amen.
Now, these are all broad, common sense propositions.
Yeah.
They are shared values across this country. So in Washington, D.C., that makes them radical and extreme.
Yep.
So how do we get this done? Because I suspect there are folks here and there are folks across the country that long to bring back the promise of America, and yet
Yes.
fear is slipping away. Fear we're losing it. I'll tell you the way to do it. What is happening right now is millions of courageous conservatives
Yes.
are standing up together. The reason I'm optimistic is the men and women in this room.
Yes.
The reason I'm optimistic is we ran out of chairs.
Yes, we did.
Any of y'all seen the movie The Usual Suspects? There's a line in it, the greatest trick the devil ever played was to convince the world he didn't exist. There's a corollary to that, which is the greatest trick the left ever played was to convince conservatives that America doesn't share our values.
Yeah.
These values, every small town, every small business, families, farmers, throughout the history of our country, this is who America is. And we need to reassemble the old Reagan coalition.
Yes.
We need to bring together conservatives and libertarians and evangelicals and women and young people and Hispanics and Reagan Democrats all coming together behind the principles of freedom
Yes.
and the Constitution.
Yes.
That's why I'm running. Heidi and I intend to spend a lot of time here in Iowa with you.
Amen.
Good.
And I am humbled and honored to have the opportunity to stand with each and every one of you as we work together. That's the president calling now. 20 months. Noon, January 20th, 2017. All right, I got to tell a final joke just on that point. The January 20th, 2017, an older man comes up to the White House, young Marine is guarding, and he says, "Excuse me, sir, President Obama here?" He said, "I'm sorry, sir, President Obama no longer lives here."
Amen.
The next day, this old man again comes up, Says, same Marine's there. Says, excuse me, sir, is President Obama here? Marine says, I'm sorry, sir, President Obama no longer lives here. Third day in a row, same older man walks up. Says, is President Obama here? And the fellow kind of sighs, the Marine. He says, sir, I've told you 3 days in a row, President Obama no longer lives here. The old man chuckles and says, I know that. I just love hearing you say it. Says, see you tomorrow, sir. And with that, I am happy to answer or dodge any questions. Yes, sir.
I'm a Spanish pastor here in
Oh,
Iowa.
fantastic.
And my question was, I was wondering what your plan is for reform in illegal immigration and how that will affect the election.
Yeah, it's a terrific question. For those of you all who couldn't hear, the gentleman is an Hispanic pastor here in Iowa and was asking about immigration reform and also the Hispanic community. You know, immigration is something where I am short-term pessimistic and long-term optimistic. The long-term I'm optimistic because I think there's actually a lot of bipartisan agreement on immigration outside of Washington. I think there is overwhelming bipartisan agreement outside of Washington that we have got to finally secure the borders.
Yes.
And stop illegal immigration.
Yes.
I think there is overwhelming bipartisan agreement outside of Washington that amnesty is wrong.
Yes.
And contrary to rule of law. And I think there's significant bipartisan agreement outside of Washington that we need to improve and streamline legal immigration. So that we don't just welcome, we celebrate legal immigrants who follow the rules and come here seeking the American dream.
That's right.
You know, this is an example where a lot of the D.C. political class tries to tell Republicans, if you want Hispanics to vote for you, you got to support amnesty.
No.
I think that's wrong on a principled matter.
That's right.
But it's also wrong as a matter of politics.
That's right.
You know, in Texas in 2012, I was very proud to receive 40% of the Hispanic vote in the state of Texas.
That's right.
Romney was getting clobbered with 27% of the Hispanic vote nationwide. Now, I ran unambiguously opposed to amnesty. But I also spent a lot of time telling my family story. I spent a lot of time talking about how in 1957, my dad had been imprisoned and tortured